I hid it out of the window, and you saw the heaven was red, and you knew something burns.
They went in all the rooms and destroying everything they could find. But all the crystal, all the glasses, whatever could be destroyed, it was destroyed.
My father was picked up on the street in the Kristallnacht, was taken to Dachau.
A synagogue in Berlin and a symbol, the Torah. A moral strength through the power of an idea. A faith that binds a people. And the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, once the ultimate symbol of Nazi power. Good evening, I'm Eric Sevareid. History fails us when we no longer remember. Tonight we remember Kristallnacht 50 years ago, a pogrom, the Nazi riot against the Jews in Germany and Austria. And for those few who managed somehow to survive, this is their story of Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night, and the succeeding 50 years as told by them. In the fall of 1938, I was in Paris working as a young reporter for the New York Herald Tribune. Even in the safety of Paris, one could sense the tension spreading over Europe. Having eliminated his political opponents, Hitler turned to his main target, the Jews. Using the most hideous propaganda, Hitler told his people the Jews were the sole cause of Germany's problems, and they believed him. The seeds of Kristallnacht were sown with Hitler's determination to rid Germany of its Jews. Most European countries foresaw the mass Jewish immigration that would follow, and they took measures to restrict the flow of refugees. Hitler countered an immigration ban by the Polish government, ordering a mass and sudden deportation of the Polish Jews living in Germany. For 28-year-old Henry Zucker of Berlin, his personal journey began with an ominous knock on the door, the police.
He took the expulsion notice out, handed it to me, handed one to my father. It told us that we have to leave Germany within 24 hours. And in case we do not comply with this order, that we will be thrown out bodily. The order also reads that we could appeal this within 2 weeks, but the following paragraph points out that our appeal will be refused.
Richard C. Hodelet, then a 21-year-old reporter in Berlin for the United Press, covered the story.
And Hitler saw that if he did not get rid of these Polish Jews before October 31st, there would be no way to send them. So he quickly had thousands of people loaded aboard trains, regular passenger trains for the most part.
We were assigned a railroad car where we could sit down, but many people had to go into freight cars.
What I recall was a great deal of confusion and a great many unhappy, very unhappy people, and just leave everything that they had lived with and done over the preceding, some of them 20, 30 years, and go into the unknown.
We always were under the impression that Hitler could not last very long.
Yet the signs were there during the previous 5 years. In 1933, we saw Hitler take power. We learned the ideas behind the man. Perhaps we hoped we misunderstood them. There were even some protests. The ideas seemed bizarre. But in 1935, Hitler introduced the Nuremberg Laws, actually legalizing Nazi philosophy, stripping Jews of their basic human rights, and totally isolating them from other Germans. All this seemed so outrageous as to be almost unbelievable, unless, of course, you were judged to be Jewish.
The Nazis did a card showing what was German. German is this one. Then is a Jew of first grade, that means half a Jew, and my mother had to fill up a questionnaire asking for my Abstammung. And that means
Your family history.
my family history. That means that is my father, and there was put on NA, non-Aryan. That means he was not German and not Jew, but non-Aryan. My mother was Aryan, and my grandmother on father's side was Jewish. And that here, that line here, my mother didn't put in, but it was put on in the school, red. That means, aha, there we have a non-Aryan girl. And I was 3/8 Jewish.
So nobody should have accepted them. But unfortunately, the German people did accept them, and especially the churches.
Up till November 1938, there were many Jews in Germany who wanted to stay in Germany, and they couldn't believe that a nation of culture would carry out that which Adolf Hitler wrote in his book Mein Kampf about the Jews and his intent towards the Jews.
Not only had Hitler's philosophy, as spelled out in his book Mein Kampf, reinforced the preposterous concept of racial purity, it also set out the blueprint for German territorial expansion. In March 1938, Hitler simply annexed Austria. His entry into Vienna was that of a conquering hero, and his greeting was tumultuous.
The next day, already the Jewish persecutions began. They begin like that they're capturing Jews on the street. You see here an Orthodox Jew, here's another one, a typical Nazi man. And you see that man here drawing on a Jewish shop the word Jude. A little bit later, you see that famous man. He's forcing a Jewish kid to draw Jude on the shop of his parents.
Next to me, where I worked, was a small Jewish shop. There was an old, wise Jewish man in it. He had wonderful fabrics there, silk and velvet, and wonderful. He said, "Please, miss, please take it. They're going to take everything from me. I know this."
And in this summer of 1938, leading up to the Munich conference, Hitler having his way and absolutely imposing his will on the leading statesmen of Europe without any response. The signal by then was very, very clear.
As the signs expressed, there was no longer any doubt for those Jews still in Germany and Austria. This large synagogue in Munich was burned in June. And for those deportees, Henry Zucker and 12,000 others, as they arrived at the Polish border, it was only too evident.
There was a lot of noise, and SS men in steel helmets came running and started to yell, "Out, out, quick, quick." We came into Poland. We were put into a camp that was vacated by a cavalry unit.
Also in the camp, the Grinspan family of Hanover, all except for one son, 17-year-old Herschel, who fled Germany for Paris in 1936. And the Grinspans turned to him for help. "Dear Herschel, no one told us what was up, but we realized that this would be an end. We haven't a penny. Could you send something? Love from us all." Herschel Grinspan, by now established in Paris, was appalled by his family's plight. Instead of sending money, he went on November 7th to this gun shop and bought a pistol. Armed, Herschel sat in this cafe going over his plan. The decision made, he got up from the table and went straight down into the Paris subway. A short journey and 10 stops later, he came up to the street and walked to the German embassy. Grinspan demanded to see the ambassador. Instead, he was directed across this courtyard to the office of the highest-ranking official present, Third Secretary Ernst von Roth. He went up these steps, crossed this hall, and confronted Ernst von Roth in his office. Grinspan pulled out his pistol, shot at von Roth 5 times, hitting him twice. Grinspan just stood there waiting to be arrested. In his pocket, already written, was a letter of explanation to his parents. I could not do otherwise. May God forgive me. My heart bleeds at the news of 12,000 Jews suffering. I must protest in such a way that the world will hear me. I must do it. Forgive me. Herschel. Von Roth clung to life for 2 more days, giving Nazi officials time to plan their response.
We knew that when the news came through that Roth died, that something would happen. We didn't exactly know what, but one sensed that something's going to happen.
When the news of his death came through on November 9th, Hitler and his top aides were in Munich, commemorating a Nazi Party anniversary. While the newsreel cameras recorded the pomp and ceremony, Nazi officials were, at the same time, setting the Kristallnacht plan into motion. Just before midnight, the orders went out nationwide. This is from a copy of that secret telex.
I was at home with my parents, and through one circumstance or another, whether or not it smelled of smoke, I don't know, we went out onto the balcony, and there we saw the synagogue burning. My father was an enthusiastic hobby filmmaker. He immediately got his camera and had no problem with the adjustments and filmed the synagogue as it burned. The entire frame burned, and then the frame collapsed. It was quiet on that evening. There weren't any people there, and we didn't know why the synagogue was burning.
They were shouting, Juda verrecke, Jews perish. From our house downstairs, Jewish people, about 36 Jewish families lived in our house, were teared and dragged from their flats on the street, and at the same time, the synagogue started to burn.
Anything that could be burned, let's say clothing and books and so forth, was thrown out the windows and burned in a small pyre in front of the house. And you could really spot Jewish houses or apartments by these fires in front of them.
I ran into an SS man that I knew. We had met once at a cafe. I said, "Tell me, what is this nonsense about? What is this all about?" And he said, "Yes, it was ordered. We didn't do that in Leipzig. We drove to Dresden, and the Dresden SS drove to Leipzig, so nobody would recognize us."
And all of a sudden, these Nazis with sticks and with anything they had knocked down the Jewish people that were walking there.
On the terrible 10th of November, the shop, I wanted to go in. I couldn't. Outside, on the sidewalk, lay my friend. On the pavement, there lay my wise friend with his head split open on the ground. They had killed him and, of course, plundered the shop completely.
At this spot, I was arrested on 10th November 1938 at 11 o'clock in the morning. The first man came to me. He looks very Jewish. He said, "Are you Austrian?" I said, "Yes." "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Yes." So he pulled out a plaque. I said, "Gestapo, follow me, you are arrested." So my mother grabbed me and started to yell, He's a child, he's a child. What do you want from him? Let him go. So she wouldn't let me go, so he kicked her with a big treat he gave her, and this time there were steps here. She rolled down all the steps. I wanted to go to her to help her to get up. He wouldn't let me. Nobody was helping her. She wasn't a young lady anymore. She got up and said, yeah, let him go, let him go. And I had to follow him. I just heard her lay down still, let him go, let him go.
We saw a large number of people assembling down there in the courtyard of the Polizeipräsidium. And then we noticed that were the people taken to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Hundreds.
And this was, of course, happening all across Germany, which became apparent to us. I must have been on the previous night shift because I then went into the office and got reports from our stringers in different German cities. Some of them, all Germans, some of them obviously party members, who phoned in some concern and in obvious shock and almost disbelief to tell us what was going on there. All I saw was this smashing of these Jewish premises. And they reported, however, harassment, brutalization, beating of people in the stores, people dragged out of their homes, people marched through the streets.
People watched the scenes of destruction, and in Vienna they heard this report actually broadcast on Austrian radio.
Wien, 10. November. Stehen mit unserem Mikrofon in dem großen Leopoldstädter Judentempel. Hier muss man es wieder der Partei zuschreiben, dass das Judentum vor dem größten Unglück bewahrt wurde. Die Juden können es sich nur selbst zuschreiben, dass es so weit gekommen ist, und das werden wir alle, die hier um mich herumstehen, bestätigen können. Die Männer der SA, die hier ihren Absperrdienst vollbringen, die können vielleicht auch etwas erzählen, wie das Ganze vor sich gegangen ist.
Ich bin erst kurze Zeit hier, aber wir räumten den Platz jetzt und weil Einsturzgefahr beim Tempel ist, es befindet sich sonst niemand hier in der Gegend.
Ja, es ist jetzt alles weg. Leute stehen nicht mehr auf der Straße und wir werden auch gleich verschwinden. Also ich glaube, der Tempel kann ohne weiteres einstürzen. Wir haben alle nichts dagegen. Was?
It was a very hard day for the young boy. It was the first time I saw destruction in my life. The first time. Yeah.
Von tiefem Grauen gepackt worden.
I was really seized by a deep horror. At that time, the Germans, by order of the government, especially young Germans, the Hitler Youth, allowed themselves to be seduced into torturing people, to set holy places on fire, to brutally destroy businesses, and then that the police and the fire department, who had been partly notified by us, went to the scenes of horror and did not interfere but allowed it to happen.
This was surreal to the average German as well as to almost anyone else. They saw that it could, I mean, they knew perfectly well that this was not a spontaneous expression. It was a concentrated, deliberate act by the government.
This was for good, we know. The end of our normal life, and normal at that time already was bad enough.
This mandatory identity document dispelled any doubts for those Jews still in Germany and Austria who had deluded themselves that this was just a passing phase.
When I am asked why didn't the Jews in Germany or in Berlin emigrate sooner, my answer was the majority of people had no connection with abroad. And emigration means also immigration. That means you had to comply with a number of conditions which the countries abroad established. I tried Holland, I tried Sweden, I tried England, I tried America, I tried Australia, and in the end, none of these attempts proved useful.
The headlines of the international press were strong, but the world's reaction was timid. This frustrated the Germans who opposed Hitler.
When the Kristallnacht happened, to us it has been really something like a God-given opportunity. It may really sound silly to you, because we said, this should be the last straw to all of them. Now something should happen. They should say, at least we break, we cut off diplomatic relations. We will get our ambassadors back. They will now really act strongly. But it didn't.
Franklin Roosevelt's reaction to reporters was unusually tough. But as President of the United States, he did not relax any of the country's strict immigration quotas. And that was reflected elsewhere in the world. Politicians mostly confined themselves to issuing strongly worded statements expressing disapproval and concern.
It raises our every sense of indignation and our every resentment. It makes us fearful for the whole progress of civilization.
In spite of almost universal condemnation, the world did nothing, and Hitler was reassured by that. He was now, in fact, so confident that in an act of supreme cynicism, he decreed that the Jews should pay for the damage done during Kristallnacht. They were to be fined almost $500 million. In the meantime, Ernst von Rath, who was, ironically, not a staunch Nazi in life, was in death given the full panoply of a state funeral with all the Nazi trappings. And Herschel Grinspan, the 17-year-old who pulled the trigger and unwittingly set the stage for Kristallnacht, eventually he wound up in Moabit prison in Berlin. In 1942, as this document shows, he was transferred to the notorious prison in Magdeburg. What happened after that is unknown. Kristallnacht turned out to be just a preview of what would follow. It would get much worse. With the start of World War II, Hitler's machine of death moved beyond the German borders, devouring everything in its path. By 1945, 6 million Jews, along with 5 million other victims, were slaughtered. And perhaps understandably, this has overshadowed the events of Kristallnacht. But we should remember that Kristallnacht was the first step along the road that would lead, ultimately, to genocide. It began with the obliteration of the centers of Jewish faith, the synagogue. That, in turn, led to the destruction of the Jewish community and its culture. We now know that on Kristallnacht, over 1,100 synagogues were destroyed, not 191, as the Nazis would have had us believe. And it was not 36 people who died, it was over 300. We know this because of the research of one man who survived Kristallnacht and the Holocaust that followed. Professor Meyer Schwartz has been on a personal odyssey trying to trace his past. When he came back to his hometown of Nuremberg trying to find his old synagogue, he was told he was mistaken. There was no synagogue, never had been. Meyer Schwartz knew better.
This was a synagogue. The upper part was a school where I went as the first and second grade. Here was a community. Here was our life. At the morning of the Kristallnacht, it was burned, the shell. And now, a garage, renting cars.
Why this mission to discover how many were destroyed?
Because the Jewish communities in Germany before the war was 1,300 communities. That's a very, very big population. So somebody has to remember this Jewish life and to find these synagogues. Darf man eine Minute reingehen?
So we're not allowed to go in.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you very much.
In each of these synagogues, you find nearby the school for the children. You find nearby a place for the Jewish bath. And you find always the Jewish people are living nearby the synagogue because twice a day they're meeting here. to pray in the morning and in the evening. But the Nazis had in mind we can destroy buildings and we destroy the Jewish life. This never happens. You know, you have many places now in Germany they try to rebuild it, but this is one of the nicest ones in this area.
How many people are there still in Ansbach?
Nobody. No Jewish people anymore.
So what will the synagogue be used for?
I don't know. Nobody needed, nobody for nobody. We are only now they have in mind we should remind something what was before.
What do you look for in terms of Jews having lived here before the war?
First of all, I'm looking for old houses near the synagogue, old houses like that. And then the next thing, to look for a mezuzah, like here. You see it here. Here was a Jewish life. Today, if you ask the people living in, they don't remember, they don't know. Many of them really don't know. We are here in Furchtwangen, and here was the place where the synagogue was standing. And this says, here stands the synagogue, built 1833, burned down in political madness. It's the 9th to 10th of November 38.
There was the Jewish bath.
Oh, yes,
Over there, the Jewish bath, the mikveh was here. Over here.
No, this is nothing.
No, it's nothing. May I see?
Yes, you may see, of course. Now this is just a piece of wood here.
Ah, here. You see nothing there anymore.
This is where the Jewish bath was supposed to be.
Like that, you have to find where the water was coming down to the mikveh. I would probably assume it was this place. It could be as well on the other side. But this is exactly the place where it could be down to the bath. But it's very hard to find now.
As you go through this period of exploration, what do you feel you're gaining from this?
The main thing is to restore what happens here before. To make a memory of our parents who are living here for many centuries. Part of this small town, it's something in between a village and a town, was built by Jewish people. He mentioned all these buildings here around Jewish people were living. He gave me the names, family Stern, Gutmann, other names all around. So they were involved. We were living very, very good together. But now, nothing remained.
By November 1938, many of those missing Jews were now behind this gate in a camp on the outskirts of Munich. The name of the camp, Dachau.
I feel the cold of this place. I feel the cold of every stone. If I see a stone, I can see the people who lived in this place. If I think to the time 1933 to 1945, if I speak about my church in this time, I have no good feelings. I know that my church, they said nothing against the Holocaust. And I hope, if I say the truth, maybe we can have reconciliation 1980.
It's amazing how people know the name of Dachau, if they come from Korea, or they come from South Africa, or they come from the Soviet Union. That is really an amazing phenomenon. It has become a symbol of, well, of a school for torturers, of the beginning of mass extermination that has started in Dachau and went to Auschwitz. I see every day that the place has a meaning that is very different from a book or a movie. You can use a book or a film as a means of teaching somebody, but the place itself, you know, still after so many years, has a lot to say and has a lot of atmosphere that you don't find anywhere else. those who still come here, who have been here as a prisoner, for them it is very important that it has become a memorial, that it's a place where young people can learn something, what has happened. This has a lot of meaning for survivors who still come to this place.
This peaceful garden is located high above the city of Dachau. It contains neat rows of greenery, but it also contains many secrets. Here you have row number 4812. In one of them is my uncle, Ernst Reis, whose name I just found today in Dachau in their archives, and who died and is buried somewhere here.
My grandparents were in Auschwitz and in Bergen-Belsen.
Most of us have had relatives that were in such camps.
We as Germans, when we visit sets, we can't speak, we can't believe it. My generation can't believe it.
We do what we can in our schools in Germany. This generation of the 40 years old, perhaps, we are long away enough from this horrible time, and we have some years to work for this obligation here, and we are deeply convinced to have opportunity that Germans and all human beings may learn about this incredible time of history.
I'm from Germany. I'm deeply moved, and I only can say that I would like to apologize.
In a corner of the cemetery above Dachau, a plaque reads, "Hear us, O pilgrim, and tell it to your people. You be the kind one, the loyal knight of peace." And telling it to the people has not been without pain. In Austria, since the end of the war, people have chosen to see themselves merely as victims. And it was not until the controversial Waldheim election just 2 years ago that the Austrians were forced to confront their past. By stepping back into that past, Austrians have, for the first time, considered their complicity with Nazi Germany and what it means for them this year, the 50th anniversary of the annexation.
And I must say that Austria has a neat tradition of anti-Semitism. I must say that somebody who is gendered and who studied Judaism. But you cannot blame anti-Semitism on everybody living here.
And you know, the discussion about, what's his name, Mr. W, brought up so terrible things that my position is I have to work against it.
It would be also extremely nasty, I think, to blame, for my generation, to blame all the oldies, of whom I personally know that they certainly do not deserve to be given any blame, apart from the fact that I don't believe in collective guilt. I don't believe in collective guilt for a generation or for a nation.
People and faithful people are now much more tolerant against other religions and minorities than it was before 38. I'm sure that something like 38 couldn't happen now. It would be impossible.
Yes, but maybe in another way.
No, but
somewhere.
somewhere else. But in this form in Austria, it couldn't be possible. It's impossible.
Today in Austria, there aren't really many Jews left, so that isn't really an issue today.
Our generation is no longer anti-Semite. Not at all.
There are some fools, but they are only... they call themselves sometimes anti-Semites because it's interesting, or it's...
Like punks or
skinheads. Yeah. It's a form of...
very little minority, but that's
it's a form of revolting against the society.
This is quite a growing group. This is, I think it is a problem. It's not, you can't just put it away. It's nothing. But the main thing in their ideas is not anti-Semitism, really.
The young generation, I would say, they don't really know what's the meaning of anti-Semitism. We have not many Jews, I must say, and so I, for myself, I would not think or feel that there is more than a little bit of anti-Semitism in Austria.
What has been imbued into emotions of people over the centuries can't be whisked away within weeks or months or even a year or two. Right now we are in a process, without doubt, of new views and new realizations of what is going on.
I come from a family where my grandfather has been a Jew, and so there was no reason to be anti-Semitic. One was more likely not to say anything what was going on before with grandfather, so in order not to get problems.
But my mother had to leave in '38. She couldn't stay any longer. But
she was Jewish.
She was Jewish. And so, but after the war, I grew up in a generation when it was almost improper to ask your parents too many questions about things that didn't really concern you. So I'm quite sad about it today that I didn't ask more questions, but I somehow had the feeling that nobody did want to talk about it. It had been so terrible that they just wanted to forget as quickly as possible.
Can anyone in this country really forget?
You try.
But can you really forget?
I don't think so.
In Austria, the anti-Semitism was always present. 7 years of Nazi didn't make it better. I wouldn't say that it is more than it had been.
But the last elections, it brought up the anti-Semitism more than it used to be here.
And no, I wouldn't say it's more, it just come up to the surface.
The Waldheim election 2 years ago revived that latent anti-Semitism, which many people hoped had died away. Waldheim was elected because he represents the average Austrian, the person who only did his duty and did not try to escape being a cog in the Nazi machine.
So now in 1988, you have a situation where Kurt Waldheim, whose offices are over here, is still the president of Austria. And there are still Jews here in this city who are afraid to pick up the phone or what the post may bring in the form of hate mail.
I got pamphlets with swastika in my flat. My windows was broken many, many times. I don't know how people know that I'm a Jew.
Do you feel that all Austrians have this animosity, hatred?
No, there are many nice people in Austria, I wouldn't say that. But quite a lot, quite a lot.
Why were you willing to speak with us today?
Because you agreed that I won't be identified. I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid to speak openly. I have enough trouble with the way it is.
Maybe there is one thing that is bothering me for some time now. Jews are accepted as victims by friend and foe alike. But Jews are hardly ever accepted as more than victims. We give more to the world than to be victims. But then they are only accepted when they are dead. Maybe there's a streak in us to take the victimization as a part of our lifestyle. I don't know. I hate it.
But you've survived.
I survived.
A new community is growing, or is an old community dying out?
This is the most important aspect of what I consider to be my duty in this community, to see that not an old community is dying out, but a new community is going to spring up.
Statistically, the Jewish community is dying. The only thing that can save it is an influx of more Jews. Here on Vienna's Mexico Platz, there is a nucleus of recently arrived Jewish immigrants, and that in itself is an irony, because their very immigration is a result of anti-Semitism someplace else. These Jewish children come from Russia, and their parents have chosen to settle in Vienna after escaping anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union. This new community is growing, but it has not been without difficulty.
And our goal, the goal of the school here, is to help this integration, to have the newcomers, the immigrant children, integrating into the local Jewish community.
Although there are problems, there are also faint signs of optimism, and the community is taking root.
But now I can confidently say that most of those who came here like it in Vienna. It is pleasant, yes. Mostly, people have adapted themselves to this life.
We have a large circle of acquaintances with Austrian Jews here in Vienna. Within our family, that is the case.
And now you see what is going on. The children will sing here, the people come here with the families, and everybody will say, look, we are here, we are still here, and Hitler could not kill us. This is the symbol of the Jewish community. This is the symbol of this house.
In several weeks, this remembrance year and the events connected with it will be over. The remembrance itself will never come to an end. Our history, unlike a package, is not something that can be neatly bound or tied up. In this year, we will understand the consequences of this history. They emphasize an important responsibility that we must come to terms with.
Since the 10th century, there are Jews living here and adding to the wealth and to the history of this country. I think this should be continued. I think the continuity should be guaranteed by us. And I would say to a 13-year-old, look at your past to see your future.
Jewish boys and girls proclaim their adulthood when they are 13 years old, a time for reflection and introspection. Germany has been looking at itself, and the reflection it sees has been very striking, because Germans have not only had to deal with what they did to the Jews 50 years ago, but what they had done to themselves as well. Before the war, there were over 500,000 Jews in Germany. Today, there are only 30,000, which makes one wonder, in spite of Hitler's defeat, did the Nazis succeed?
Actually, they have accomplished what they wanted, with the exception of a few Jews, of a few German Jews, who are here again.
Victims and perpetrators are living together side by side. And that certainly is an unusual or unnatural situation. The person is still alive, he is there. He may be sitting next to me in the underground or in a coffee house. I don't know who he is, and he doesn't know who I am. But it's still there. I can't help it. And it will take many generations. You see, it is too easy to say it's all over. It isn't.
What we try to do is to encourage Jews to live here and have a community here and have their synagogues, their schools, and their cultural life. Now, this is not easy because Jews have a hard time to feel at home in Germany.
In Germany, the surface for the visitor looks fairly placid, fairy tale country. There's a very diligent population going about its business like every day. But if you look under the surface, the question of how to deal with the Nazi past, and I don't mean only the Holocaust, sure, but I mean the whole problem of what had happened here and why. This question is still very much alive in their emotional and in their life and in their memory.
We are a new generation. We are not schuldig, what about guilty, I think. But for all the other generations, we must this place show, I think.
How many people say, it's been a terrible time, it should never have happened? How many people really think, after all, it's been a great time, but the pity we lost the war? The funny thing is in Germany, and of course I would never make any statement generally against all Germans, because that probably would not be right. But the average German person of all the age groups doesn't want to hear anything about it.
I believe that my fellow citizens know perfectly well that it was the German people which has created the mess in which we are in. And that has to do with the Nazi policies and with the crimes of that period of our history. So the Brandenburg Gate is the symbol of our division, but it is also the symbol of the failure of German policies in the 30s.
The Jews in Germany are small in number, but are they still of a consequence for this nation?
I think yes. They are small in number because of the events in the past, but what they tell us and what they try to teach us is of great moral value.
It is about a dialogue, it's about discussion. It's about being politically alert here, to raise one's voice whenever signs of developments which may lead to disaster become visible. That I see as a survivor. My largest task is that there will never be again another Auschwitz.
And that determination is reflected throughout Germany. The view over the wall reinforces the continuing cost of Germany's past. In East Berlin, one of the largest synagogues in pre-war Germany has been left in ruins since the war. Now the East German government has decided to rebuild it as a community center for the benefit of the 300 Jews in all of East Berlin.
Ganz in diesem Sinne ist in Berlin.
The reconstruction in Berlin is, in a sense, a symbol in the capital of the German Democratic Republic, like in all the cities of our country, where there were synagogues which were violated and burned by Nazism, to rebuild them, and also in the cemeteries where young people who feel themselves as one with the ideas of socialism, but also boys and girls of other beliefs who are actually putting the good places of the Jewish people back into the consciousness, not only of our citizens, but that of the visitors from all over the world.
Also, there are a lot of things which I like to forget.
It is very difficult for you, obviously, to come back here and see this.
Yes. Well, it's, I must say my mother died of a natural death. Whereas my brother, which is her father, did not, neither did the rest of my family.
Do you feel that in the future more Jews will find a home here and will, in fact, feel comfortable living in East Germany?
Kurz gesagt, I hope so.
How many people came to this synagogue before the war?
This synagogue has 2,000 places.
And tonight you expect?
Tonight, I think 25, 30. It is different.
And I also believe that Jews like me should be here and do a lot of things for the Jewish family, you know, for the Jewish people. And when all Jews leave Germany, then Hitler posthum would have succeeded in what he wanted, to have no Jews. Deutschland judenfrei, and I just don't want him to have this effect. You know, if you think about it, this man Hitler, he really changed the world, and we're sitting here after 50 years and we're still arguing what came out of it, and we didn't solve it. All the people we talk to, we see they suffer from it still. We suffer from it still. Of course, the Russians liberated, and then you had Stalinism, and so there was good things and bad things. I mean, it's one layer on the other, so really we have to see what goes on.
I belong to Germany. I always was a German, even during the Nazi times, when they didn't let me be a German. But I was. I hadn't any chance to be something else. With all the difficulties and with what Germany did and what Germany went through. But still, you can't shake it off if you are born in a land and never been out. And I am a German. I am a German non-Aryan.
And do not forget that 200,000 Jews of Germany were taken to concentration camps, including many relatives of mine. And I have asked the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz to let me have that huge Gedenkbuch for the victims, for the Jewish victims of Nazi persecution from 1933 to 1943. And that book has a special place in my library.
In the next 50 years, 100 years, there will not be, I think, no concentration camps and something you will not have. But the Jews are always outsiders. Maybe if we would be more people, it would be easier.
I can't say you don't have anti-Semitism here, you have it. But I personally say you have to fight against it. You don't have to go back if you see a Nazi. So you have to stay, and you have to show him your face, and you have to try to convince him that what he is doing, that is silly.
Just hope one of these days people will wake up and understand if we don't do something, we have to not forget, but understand that we all are human beings. I really believe in that.
Our attitude today is, in the words of Elie Wiesel, don't forget, but forgive. And approach today's generation with open eyes and possibly open arms.
History is not a perfect guide to present or future, but it's one of the few we have. It can be concealed or doctored only at peril to both present and future. Kristallnacht revealed for modern man some old truths that the membrane holding civilized life is thin, that there is no limit to man's inhumanity to man unless limits are imposed, and that man nevertheless retains a remarkable capacity to rise again and to look again for the better angels of his nature. This is Eric Sevareid. Good night.